Well, ladies and gentlemen, we just got an absolute atom bomb that was dropped by the University of Mary Washington. This is a pollster that doesn't have a lot of history, but they did put out a poll back in 2019 in Virginia that had Biden up by 18 over Trump. He won the state by like 10, so they overestimated the Dems back in the 2020 election. There's not a lot of polling data on them, admittedly, but these are crazy numbers. Kamala Harris up by 2 over Donald Trump. You expand it to the full field, it is Harris +1 over Trump. That's with RFK Jr. And obviously RFK has fully endorsed Trump. You also do have Tim Kaine sitting at 49%. There is speculation, will Trump do a rally in Virginia? Will it be a state he invests a lot of resources in, or should he stay away considering the massive left swing that it had? He barely lost it in 2016, and then he lost it by 10 points in 2020. I would say we need more reputable, although I don't know what you would call a reputable pollster at this point, considering the polls that we've seen recently, completely biased, completely oversampling Dems. But I would say maybe a few more polls out of Virginia. But this is a really great news for Trump if he can expand the math even further. And I was going to see on Polymarket if they had the Virginia state odds, see if it updated at all based on the recent poll, but it hasn't. But these odds do update basically every minute, and it's mainly based off of polls or real world events. That's kind of where with Polymarket they're better in terms of that. I mean, I have seen Kamala Harris go up to around 52%. At one point, she was at 54%. And people always ask me when it comes to Polymarket, they say in the chat, do you trust it? What do you think about Kamala going up? You know, it ebbs and flows. That's what I say. But as long as Harris is around 51%, we have to understand this is Polymarket. This is a reflection of the up to the minute polls. We know the polls overestimate Dems, especially underestimating Trump. So if Harris is sitting at 51%, you would say, well, Harris has a better chance than Trump, right? Well, understand that Polymarket is based off of polls. If they're barely favoring Harris, I mean, imagine Polymarket in 2016, they would have had Hillary at like an 80% chance. Biden would have been like at a 75-80% chance. The fact that Harris is at 51, it's great news because these are mainly based off of the polls. And if she's barely leading the polls based off of the overestimation, she's likely losing the actual election. And so they do update, and I would expect her to come back down again. This ebbs and flows, but it is an up-to-the-minute update when it comes to that. And I think she was at 52 and she's come back down to 51. I'm not sure if that was based off of probably just, market movement. That's just 1 point. But in general, she did go up after the debate. So, you can take that for what it is. But either way, when it comes to this poll, this is an amazing poll. And I am going to talk about how this potentially could change the math when you put Virginia. And again, let's see more polls out of Virginia. Let's get some actual reputable pollsters to do it. I'm not saying this pollster is. They've got limited history. We need more polls out of there to make sure that Trump actually can win the state. Although I will say with Youngkin, his approval rating of +15, +20 in some polls in that state, I mean, that's a Republican, and that's someone that endorses Trump, that wants Trump to win. That means something. He won the state in 2021 as a Republican. So the dynamic there is a little bit different than just saying, oh, Trump can win New Mexico, Trump can win Minnesota. Well, no, Virginia, they have shown the propensity to go to the right. And right now, Glenn Youngkin has an approval rating there of +15, +20. And Biden's approval rating, I saw the same pollster also did that. It's -16. He's got a 37% approval rating, which is a lot lower than what the average is at this point. Well, I wouldn't say a lot lower. I think his average right now is 39. Virginia's at 37. But in general, now you've got a situation with Virginia potentially at play. Let's say Trump ekes out Virginia by 2 or 3 points. You're at 232. You've got a number of options. I feel like the Democrats have already kind of given up Arizona and Nevada. Maybe not. Maybe they'll be able to take those states. I know there's some polls. I mean, these are just far left pollsters, man. It's garbage. And I've discussed it several times, and I'll probably discuss it in another video. But there's even more that have come out that say, oh, Nevada, she's leading Nevada by 1 point or it's tied. But it's like they've given up those states. So let's just say that ends up happening. Now Trump's at 240, 249, and you've got so many options here. But really, you don't need any of the Rust Belts. Obviously, New Hampshire is probably going to be pretty hard to win. But in general, you're at 249. You've taken Virginia. This is still losing Minnesota. But at this point, let's just say you take North Carolina, which seems not completely easy, but let's be honest, based off of Trump's 2020 and 2016 numbers, you would figure he would also take North Carolina this year, probably by 3 or 4 points, a similar margin as the Hillary result in 2016. Technically, you could take New Hampshire and win the election at 269 if it's a tie. Trump wins, and you'd be losing Georgia and you'd be losing the full Rust Belt, but you still win because of Virginia. But that is a little bit more unlikely. Winning New Hampshire, let's say he loses New Hampshire. Now at this point, you're really looking at one more state. So you could go Georgia, you could fully get swept in the Rust Belt and still easily win with 281. Or you could lose Georgia if they invest a ton of resources and narrowly squeak out of Pennsylvania and then still end up winning the election, even losing Michigan and Wisconsin narrowly. But we would expect, based off of recent polls, him to win Wisconsin. And if he wins Wisconsin, I would also think, although these are going to be very close margins, he would win Georgia. Now you're up to 310. That's with Virginia. Now you're at a blowout territory. Maybe you also take Michigan because we've seen some positive polls. Now you're at 325. So see, Virginia opens up a lot of things. We do need to see more polling from that state. But I will say this should affect the overall odds, because if Virginia, like, you have to understand, the reason Trump is going down is, I mean, I saw Nate Silver come out and say, oh, now, his model has Kamala up. He's factoring in all these bad polls from heavy liberal bias pollsters that have been proven wrong and wrong again in terms of how they poll Trump. It's like when you factor in Quinnipiac, it's an issue, but that's the same thing with Polymarket. These people see these polls and they say, oh my God, Harris is up by 8. I have to vote for her. I have to, bet on her because she's going to win. And that pushes her up. And that pushes her up from 46, and that's the live. But she is coming down a little bit. I would expect her to continue to come down. Again, she did reach 54. She's at 52 right now. She was at 45 at one point. This will ebb and flow. As long as she stays around 50, it's good news for Trump, because this is based off of the polls. There's no real insider. I mean, there's too much money. There's no real insider. Oh, the sharks are coming out. This is just common people betting on this. And so as long as it's around 50%, we know the polls underestimate Trump. There's a very good trap. I would feel great if Harris went into the election with a 51% chance on Polymarket to win the election. If she went into election night like that, I would say Trump's winning for sure when it comes to that. So overall, looking at this poll, this is great news for Trump. Obviously, the pollster, we will see if there's more polling. I would imagine since this came out, there's going to be more polling out of the state of Virginia, but it does open up doors for Trump. And then maybe it also opens up, hey, maybe New Mexico is at play. If Virginia, although I will say again, there's a different dynamic with Virginia, with Glenn Youngkin possibly rallying with Donald Trump along with Tulsi Gabbard at a rally in Virginia. And I know people say, well, should Trump go to Virginia to invest resources there, do a rally? I mean, if you're going to go to New York, I mean, I don't see why not. Again, I would like to see more polls. I'm sure Trump has internal numbers based on how they're doing in Virginia. And are they really down by 2 points? There's just been so few polls, we really don't know. But when you see a state like this, it really is. And people say, well, what about Texas, Trump only being up by 4? We know those are crap polls. Those have been crap polls from the beginning. That's not this. Texas is not this. Ted Cruz is not going to lose Texas. There's a poll that came out that said Ted Cruz was down by 1 in Texas. This is laughable. I remember seeing the same stuff in 2020. I remember seeing the same stuff in 2016 in Iowa and Missouri. It's the same liberal crap. It's not going to happen. There are simply crazy polling errors. You could say, well, is this a polling error? I would say we need more polling out of the state, but this is a state that has shown that they can go Republican, and Glenn Youngkin has an approval rating, the governor, of plus 15 in this state. So you really think they can't vote for a Republican for president when this is shown to be a swing state in the past, and Trump barely lost it in 2016? Yeah, he lost it handily in 2020. I'm not arguing that, but it can swing a lot in one election cycle over 4 years. We saw that happen from 2016 to 2020. Why can't it swing back? We'll see what ends up happening. Maybe Trump ends up losing it by 2 or 3 points, but even if that's the case, that's very bullish news when you factor in all the other states. If he's only losing Virginia by a few points, a lot of these swing states are going to be very close, but you would think it would be good news in those states as well. So this is a very good poll. We will wait for more polling data, but we're starting to move Virginia. And at one point when it was Trump versus Biden, Virginia was a swing state for a few weeks until Biden dropped out. Also, Minnesota was a swing state. We'll have to see. Minnesota, there's been polls that have said Harris is up by 5 or 6. It's going to be harder in Minnesota. I think that's commonly thought of. That's like the opinion that Minnesota is going to be harder than Virginia for a number of reasons. But you've got Youngkin there in Trump's corner. This will be interesting, and we'll have to see what ends up happening. But either way, guys, that is going to do it for this video. Make sure you follow me on X. Link to that's always in the description.